Hello and welcome back to the 5th episode of the My Generation podcast. Thank you all for tuning in for this episode. Today we have something actually a little bit different. This podcast is going off script. We don't have a guest lined up either. Today what I wanted to do, and do let me know in the comments below whether you like episodes like this, is to go over the comments of one of the first episodes of the My Generation podcast and just have a little chat about what people have been saying. And don't worry, we've still got 2 more podcasts lined up with guests. We've got Michael Hugh, who will be talking about solo travelling very soon. And we also have Stephen Barwick, who will be talking about trains again very, very soon on the show. But today, just wanted to spend the next half an hour to 40 minutes talking about social media detoxing. So I put out after the show on Facebook, Instagram, just a few messages asking people what they thought about social media and if we should detox it. And we got a few varied responses that I just wanted to go through with you guys today. We got a comment from Charlie on Instagram saying it's both extraordinary and highly toxic. It's insanely powerful. And I think he's talking there in relation to the influence that social media has. It has such a massive control over the modern world. And yes, it can be a great thing. He's also feeling it can be quite toxic for the people on it as well. Something that me and Dan briefly touched on was the pressure and expectation of people to post, to keep their social media updated. And the extraordinary is the amount of stuff you can learn, I think. There's so much interactivity, there's so much for you to gain, so much knowledge. And we talked about outlets and ways you can use different social media to actually gain just the benefits from it, at least I think. Now, I also took the question to Facebook, and we got some really great answers. I also think it's really cool that we're asking the question of why we use social media on social media. I got all these great responses because of it. So we had George, who said that it's designed to be addictive. So me and Dan briefly touched on in the first episode how the watch times are extended on Facebook and Instagram because you're shown the first lot of best posts you want to see. Most people sit on the YouTube homepage rather than going to subscriptions because it is generating what's going to be your next content. Also, watch later tabs, I think, for YouTube especially, because you're watching a video that's quite close to your niche and then immediately you can go and watch something very similar, and it's going to keep taking you on that train. Also, YouTube likes to have videos that are 10 minutes and longer because advertisers, it's easier to fit an ad or 2 in there as mid-rolls. And so I think a lot of YouTube content is designed around being longer, which is why I also think something like Vine took off when it did, because it gave you the opposite, where it was something quite short and snappy. But both have their quite addictive tendencies. So Vine was such a short thing. It was 7-second stories, effectively. And Vine could lead to some very creative stories because you are so restricted. But it led to very high turnover of content and people moving on from trends day to day. It became one of the fastest social medias. And Twitter's quite like that as well, where every bit of news is moving in the hour. And because you aren't now being shown the most recent posts, the conversations have already happened on those posts and you're sort of left to just tap a react or like, rather than being necessarily as much encouraged to comment by the way the social medias work now. But I still think the comment sections are a very, very interesting part. And when I put this question out on social media, I got some really, really great responses. We still have a lot of responses to go as well. Next we had Jack, who wanted to say it's a case-by-case thing with social media. Just because one person feels they need to take a break from it doesn't mean another person will need to as well. And I think that's very true. I think, like the quote that Dan brought at the end of the podcast episode, you are all at different points in your life. Social media is something that can be used in the right way. We talked about ways that we do use it personally, although I don't know if there's even necessarily a correct way to use social media. It's different for every single person. And so the way in which you'll need to take a break will be quite different because you might need to still keep it up for work. And if you're going to completely cut ties with it for a bit, then you have to make sure those work outlets are closed down. And obviously some people are quite happy with how they're using social media. Just because some people feel like it needs to change from its current way of being used, not everyone does, and I know YouTube certainly brings a lot of joy to me, even when I'm just using it more leisurely rather than work-based, as I know a lot of people do, and it can bring laughter, and if I'm going to focus on something that isn't educational on YouTube, I'll try and make it something comedic, something that's going to make me laugh, because that's just what I want. I just want to feel good, I want to laugh in my own time, where I'm away from all my other work and social events, and I think that's sort of what works for me, and taking a break from it was really just to expand my horizons. And I think even if you don't take a break from social media, or even if you don't want to, it's still worth trying just to see what that life is like, because you get a much more different perspective. I feel like when I took a break from social media, I was a lot more aware of what was around me. I went to Brighton, obviously, to social media detox, and when I came back, I feel like I had a more vivid image of Brighton than I would have if I didn't. And I don't feel like other places in and around it I'm as keyed in with because I have my phone. Whereas with Brighton, I was able to take in everything, all five senses, and I've gained a lot more. I wrote some of my thoughts on my trip to Brighton. I just had a much more vivid paintbrush than I usually have with most places, and I even sometimes feel I have with my own city. I'm in Canterbury here at the moment, and because I just go around the city on autopilot now, because I know it so well, there are certain little nuggets of gold within the city that I feel like I might not be as aware of because I'm going around with a phone or distraction, or because I've been here so long I think I know the city, but there's always something new to uncover in Canterbury, and I don't know about wherever you are right now, but there probably is too, even if it's not a city. The next point was from Stephen. He had said, "My friend just recently gave up on all social media. He said it was because it takes his focus away from things he wants to achieve, too distracting. I need it for work, but hardly use it outside of that." And I think that that's a very valid way of using social media. I know that for me, I only use it for the most part, especially Facebook, for work and talking to friends. Because when you're constantly looking at everyone else's highlights, Dan used the term that everyone uploads their highlight reels to Instagram, it can sometimes get a bit downing when you see that everyone else's lives are so manicured and perfect, even though they're not. Everyone's got their own problems to be dealing with. Everyone's got their things, their things that's going on, their baggage, and it doesn't come across on social media like they do. And you can definitely manicure it to make it look a lot better than it might actually be. And I know I'm guilty of that, but I also feel that there is a certain amount of the person will see a post, see you having fun, and might be saddened by it because they obviously want to long for something as good as that. Maybe you've just gone out somewhere quite nice and the person who's viewing it really wanted to be there. And it could put them down, or it could inspire them to go there. They might just be happy for you. And in some cases it tends to be both. I think it's kind of a grey area where someone might see a post and be like, I'm quite happy for that person, but I wish I was there too. Or I wish my life was this interesting too. And so the complexities of that and how much focus that takes away from you, I can understand why someone might want to completely drop it for everything except work, actually. And in fact, the very next comment from Tom after that was, yes, I should take a break from the social media because I should be working right now. And I posted this question whilst during 9 to 5 regular work hours, just kind of to see what would happen. I was on a lunch break just to see what would be the response and whether I'd be able to get any comments during work hours, and most of them did, because I feel like social media is something you can just dip into, especially if you also use it for work. As I know, I mentioned in the first episode, I sort of use Facebook Messenger like emails now, where I respond to people about events, other work meetings, booking guests for this show, other jobs. I find it quite a good place. And Jack, the next comment, agrees with me. Jack says, social media for me is crucial. My work uses it to update us on new procedures. All of my group projects at uni have required at least some use of social media group chats. I don't find social media distracting from my life or focus away from what I'm doing, as I don't use it frequently. And it sounds like, Jack, you've got quite a good balance there. I agree with a lot of what you say. So regarding social media group chats, I'm also a university student doing film production, and I have used group chats on Facebook for all of our projects. We start on the first day that we're given a film project, a Facebook group with the date and the project title as the group name, and then add all the people involved in the project, and we put all of our scripts, all of our ideas, all of our running orders, all of that goes through the Facebook group, which is interesting. We've used WhatsApp before for other work. I've used Skype. It's absolutely essential, I agree. And if you can keep that healthy distance as well from just letting it overwhelm your life, then it sounds like you've got a good balance. It's so crucial for work, and I think that's something that might go under the radar when people talk about social media needing to change, but the interactivity of group chats is something that I think is essential and really, really is a game changer, because I've used it for the longest time. If you have to use it for your job as well, regarding work procedures, they probably update people via emails usually, but if they're using social media, then you can have bigger group chats. You can see who's seen the post because you have the red icon, and it's all immediate, and you can do it outside office hours as well. You don't have to be sat at a desk. You can do it from your phone. So I think that's actually a very interesting balance as well. Social media being crucial. And if you're able to stop it distracting, I think a lot of the comments we've got so far have been about distraction and how the good is the interactivity and the ability to use it for work, and the bad has been the distraction from free time. And I sort of feel that, yes, in a work setting, it's really good, but in maybe a social setting, from what I'm gathering from these comments, when you've got your own time, that it can be quite draining, because when you're meant to be relaxing and recouping, you're taking in all this content, and when there's so much information on social media, it can be quite overwhelming. So I maybe challenge you, maybe just for 1 week, see if you're more energized by not touching social media outside of your work hours. Maybe your job does require social media, so maybe you have to use it for that. But outside of those hours, see if you can drop it. See if it gives you more energy. Because I know when I was away in Brighton, my body clock reset because I wasn't on my phone like late in the night, and I was able to sort of just go to bed when it was dark and then wake up when it was light. And I was only there for a few days, but I just felt like I had more energy. I don't know if you've had this before. I just feel I could do more with the hours in the day. I felt I was less tired, and now I feel like if I want a bit more energy boost, I'll spend less time on my phone. I try not to touch the phone on the train. I try to use that time for either contemplation or work or reading or essay writing, and not just sort of mindlessly scrolling, which is something that I was guilty of before when I used to get the train quite frequently to work, as that's quite a common thing I think on public transport, which is where a lot of social media use comes from. But I think you can get really energized from just taking time to just sit, whether you're on a bus or a train. It's actually quite relaxing, especially for me. I've got a long train journey. I'm on the train for about an hour and a half in total, and being able to spend some of that time thinking about new ideas. Well, and that's an hour and a half either way, so I get this in the morning and the night. I can think of new ideas. I can think of film ideas. I can think about essays I'm going to be writing. I can put tasks to other jobs. It's really important to me, and I'd recommend it. I'd recommend trying that for your journeys to work. Although obviously I think that sometimes having a voice to listen to is quite good. I work in radio. I think that having a large portion of radio listeners are people in the car on their own, just having a voice to talk to, and that can spawn and generate ideas if you're listening to shows that are very idea heavy, talk shows, discussions, listening to interesting people with different stories to tell rather than just music sometimes, because music's got its place. But I don't know. Tell me what you think again. I'd love to keep this as a rolling topic, maybe, if you guys find this interesting. I've still got more Facebook comments to come, but feel free to leave your thoughts below in the comments section, as I definitely want to hear from what you think about my thoughts here on social media and whether you've tried to take any time away and how that went down. Another thing, just from my perspective, I feel that because most people spend their time on social media sat down, it's very easy to just sit in one rigid position, and because you're sat for quite long hours, especially if the social media is quite addicting, you can end up just sat still doing nothing for a number of hours. It can really take its toll on your physical body. I've noticed that sometimes, because I'm sat down at work quite a lot, and then if I'm sat down on the train and I'm on my phone, and if I'm sat down when I get home, it becomes a lot of sitting. And luckily I've got I do badminton, so that supplements it. But I think that taking that time away from social media also means you're aware of how long you're sitting for, and sitting in an uncomfortable position, because when you're on social media, you're not thinking about your physical body, you're thinking about what's in front of the screen. And as a result, you can miss things. Like, I can miss that I'm sat hunched or sat looking down or knotting my neck or whatever. So moving on to another, we have quite a long comment here from John. There are just as many positives as there are negatives to social media, from connecting the world to being a platform for hate and violence. Ultimately, from the social detoxers I've spoken to, they have found that social media is addictive and have a lot more free time to live life to the fullest instead of watching others live their lives. As for myself, I use it as a way to connect with people outside of social media, but it is surprising how reliant we have all become on our phones. Yeah, that's a really, really strong argument from John. I think the key theme I've got from a lot of these comments, all from commenters based in Kent, social media takes time from your free time. I like what he said about instead of watching other people living their lives, because I think there is a balance. If you spend a little bit of time on social media, but then go out and are living your own life, then it's healthy, like what Jack said earlier about he doesn't think it's distracting because he's got his work, he's got his job, he's got his university projects. And so social media doesn't distract him because he has those two other avenues. If you're living your life and then occasionally checking social media, then surely it's all right. I post to a personal page where I share my experiences, and I look at other people's, but then I go out and I do my own things. I'm at a job, I'm at uni. You keep that separation. You've got your own life and you're also able to see what other people are up to, but not letting it suck you in to the point where you stop living your own life and just live through other people's experience on social media. And I think that's where the danger comes in. And so that's where, if you feel like you're looking at someone's experience and being sad about it because their life is better than yours seemingly, maybe we're starting to live our lives more through social media than your own life. I know I've been in that boat. I was in that boat a couple of years ago where I didn't have the job and I was fresh out of college. And you just see everyone off doing their own really cool things. And I know it can put you down when there's not that thing that you're doing. But note that, first of all, this is quite common. I think this is something that a lot of people go through, especially in today's time. But that it is fixable. There are always avenues for you to be able to start living your own life more, whether it is through work or through socializing. We've talked about an app called Meetup on the show as well. When me and Dan spoke, we spoke about how we met on Meetup, how it boosted our social life. You can just take a group of friends out. There are so many activities. We live here in Kent. We try to keep a little bit of like a local impact. So we try and talk about Kent-based things you can do. And even if you don't live in Kent, there's so many activities that you can try for the first time. I think trying something new also is amazing. I've taken the step into trying to market myself as a person. I'm going to be going to LinkedIn Live events. There's one in Maidstone. And by the time you're listening to this, I've probably already been to that event. Stepping out of my comfort zone and trying something a little bit different to what you're used to. Because if you do, and it's away from social media, you'll feel energized. I know me and my friend Stephen, who's going to be on the show very soon, we're going to be talking about trains on the show, but I'm also with him, we're going to be looking to do other sports. We're probably going to be doing an episode on something called a flotation experience, which I've never tried before. And I'm a bit hesitant about it, but I'm going to give it a go. And it's something different and exciting in my calendar to be looking forward to. And I think that's something that's great for me, is that not only am I happy or trying to be happy in what I'm doing currently in the present moment. So at the moment recording this podcast, I've got some really great days lined up ahead work-wise, but also trying to just have something to look forward to. I know that I've, regarding my constant sitting at work, I'm going to be having a talk with someone about getting rid of some of that stress, yoga, massages, proper ways of sorting my back, because I used to have back problems, and with all the sitting, a little bit of that's come back up in my back, and I'm trying to once again get rid of those. So I'm going to be trying something new with massages, yoga, meditation again, which I used to do a lot a few years back, and getting into slightly different avenues. If you can find something new, it's away from social media, different. I really want to try the kayaking in Folkestone at some point. I'll keep mentioning it on the podcast until eventually there's one day that I actually do it. And maybe you find out about that thing through social media. But if you take the step to go beyond the app, then that's good. Facebook events are quite popular. I have never really been to much live music before. There was a tribute band, I think it was for The Who at the Penny Theatre. I forget exactly who it was for. And that's in Canterbury. And I went along because I had never been to live music really before. And I loved it. Absolutely adored it. It's not something I do frequently. Pushed my comfort zone. And I found out about that through social media, but I took it beyond the app. And maybe if you see something that catches your eye on a social media app, try actually signing up. See what it's like in person, face to face. So we just got 3 more questions to go for this social media topic. I really hope you've enjoyed the episode so far. Once again, do let me know what you think of this style of episode in the comments below. It's a little bit different than the other 4 episodes we have up on the channel. But I do want to know what you think. I want to know if you like this, whether I should do it again for any of the other topics we've had, or whether you prefer the more talky back and forth with someone else as well, as they're 2 very different styles of podcast. And I just thought I'd try something a bit new this week. And let me know what you think about it. Alex messaged in again on Facebook saying, I use it far too much. However, it is an amazing tool for developing a business. Now we know Alex is a freelance worker, so a lot of her work comes through going to social media events. I think she'll be at the LinkedIn Live one that I'm going to. She runs Code Harbor. And I think that's another thing. You can, on social media, post work events. So this LinkedIn Live I'm going to, and I know she does weekly or monthly workshops as well, all advertised through social media. I run a murder mystery company, or micro murder mystery company, and I post a lot of the events on there, advertised through social media. Meetup and Facebook are the 2 avenues. So I agree. My business would be nothing if it wasn't for social media, and Alex is in the same boat. It helps you reach the world, and even though we're just based in Kent, it helps us reach all the corners of Kent, all the audience we're trying to reach just within our local area, because I know on Facebook you can target marketing to certain areas. Next we had Paige, who messaged in saying, I love social media to a certain degree. Some people become too consumed by it and often miss out on reality. So I think again that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where you can become so unaware of your physical body when you're on social media. I know when I walk around the high street, some people aren't even physically aware of their physical surroundings and will walk into things, walk into other people because they're on their phone. when I'm on the train, I'll see a beautiful view out the window, and sometimes I'll miss a beautiful view because I was on my phone. When I went to Brighton and I didn't use my phone, I tried to take in as much of what was outside the window as possible. And I saw some really great stuff. I saw swans flying through in sort of like a mini pack just above the ground, sort of parallel with the train. And that was beautiful. The weather was amazing. I don't feel like I'd have seen it if I'd had my head buried in my phone, and I'd have missed out. And lastly, from Mariana, trying to find the balance. I think that's the key. And I think that's the key of what we can take away from all of what we've talked about today. It's balance. We all use social media in very different ways, and I think it has its place. I think balance is the one thing that we've really touched on today. Making sure you're living your own life outside of the social media, away from all the noise, away from all the action, and actually having something that you can go back to. A hobby on the side is really good. As we said in the second episode of the podcast, I'm a Lego collector. It's a great hobby to supplement all of the work. I also enjoy just going out and talking to people, hearing their stories, interacting, but I know that everyone else has their different thing. And I'd say finding a hobby away from social media to fill some of your free time, whether it's something you do on your own or whether it's something you involve yourself with in a group, both are important. And I know within Kent there are so many avenues to explore your hobbies and what you want to do in your social life away. You can paint, you can swim, you can play badminton, you can go out with friends, read, cinema, travelling across the county, long walks, bike rides. You can do all of these in groups or alone, and I think people long to do, and I was in that boat. I had sat at home before without any real idea of how to get into these things. And I do think having a friend there helps. If you want to message about any of how I got involved with badminton or how I got involved with other hobbies, how I broke into them, message in the comments. Everyone's in the same boat if you're a little bit on the negative side of social media, because I think it often stems from how it's being used and how the content is being viewed that people are posting within your friendship groups. And again, social media is evolving into being something very interesting, how it's being used a lot more in a work sense. And the work sense of social media, from what I gather from the comments, is very positive. But the social aspect and the distraction is not. And distraction is the key word I'm going to take away from this as an improver for myself and an improver for what I recommend. As I found it very interesting that most people spoke about it with those two distinct ways. So distraction. It's very easy to be distracted by social media. I know. I have. And no one's going to put you down for being distracted too, because it's very common. But I think that it can lead to a loneliness. I know the loneliest I've felt in my life is when I've been the most engaged with social media. And I think that there's been problems in other countries, certainly. I know there was in Japan, where because of the high amounts of social media usage, people just are not talking to each other. And I think that human interaction is such a vital part of life. And if you miss it, it's just gone, and it's absolutely priceless. You can't buy it. It's not like buying a new phone. It's not like buying a car. It doesn't matter how rich you are. Having people around you is satisfying to talk to interact with, to be with, to share ideas. And if you miss that, there is something missing. I'd consider myself an introvert, but yet being around people is such an important part of my life, and I couldn't see myself anywhere else otherwise. I'm going to link in the description of this a short monologue from a movie, which is T2 Trainspotting. Knowing the context of the movie's surroundings is quite handy to have. So Trainspotting, the original movie, came out in 1999, and it was about a group of addicts living in Scotland and how they dealt with that. And then they made a sequel, T2 Trainspotting, 20 years later. It came out in 2017, but it's set to be around 20 years later. and that explores what it was like 20 years on for them and how they've evolved, and into a social media world with some of the scenes in the movie. And there is a monologue from Mark Renton that I'd really recommend watching just about social media, and it's called Choose Life. It's based off of a saying that they had from the trailer for the first Trainspotting, and it's brought into a more modern age, modern context. And I'd really recommend watching it because it talks about all the things that someone who's basically flown by the last 20 years and how much he's missed from a character perspective. It's quite an emotional scene, and you can miss out if you let life pass you by. And I know that I have before, but then again, it's now not about regretting it, because the regret will not carry. I think it's about moving forward with purpose and optimism. I try to keep as optimistic as I can in every single situation, and I just hope that if I've maybe made one listener's day a little bit better, then it was all worth it. And I really hope you've enjoyed the podcast so far in this different format as well, which feels a little bit more personal, just like a one-to-one talk between you, the listener, and me. And I hope you found it interesting, and I hope it's been able to have a takeaway. So if there's been any specific takeaway you've got, then do let me know again in the comments below. So, just now to go a little bit more on a script, that was me, Max, talking about the social media comments and responses we got. Thank you all so much for all of your messages on Facebook and Instagram. Really appreciated, really detailed comments, and I hope my comments and thoughts going back at you have been interesting as well. Really enjoyed this episode. Something a little different as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But there are future topics that we are still looking for people to talk about. And if you've got a story about mindfulness and meditation, get in touch. Maybe you do yoga. Maybe you have in the past. We want to hear your story. We're also looking for a guest about acting and expression. Maybe you're actually the person performing on a stage. Maybe you do vocal work or film acting. We want to hear from you if you're aged between 18 and 30 and live in Kent. You can contact me, links in the description for my email, also the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast. Again, all links in the YouTube description. The last thing I wanted to just mention about social media before we close the show is that you can feel that people are quite transparent and open on social media. People, I think, in a way are... I spoke to a family member about this who, when they first saw social media break through, they never expected so many people to give up so much of their life for free and put it out on social media. It's very open. People can be very honest about themselves and what they're going through. And I'm sure as this podcast goes on, we'll touch on very close to home subjects. I know in the third episode, one of my favourite things we talked about was sport and community, and we talked about body image and positivity, as Joe, our guest, had a pigeonhole chest, and I had quite bad acne growing up. So when we both used to go swimming, we would both get looks. We'd both have people talking about us, and we managed to come to quite a positive conclusion about that through talking about the experience, being quite open on this podcast. And I think that it gives listeners a person to talk to. It gives viewers of content on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, someone who's going through a similar experience to you. And I hope that anyone who's listened to that podcast will feel connected and will understand what it's like and will resonate and gain something from what we spoke about in that episode, because we both agreed that through sport and through mature people and being around the right people, those problems tend to melt away, especially with a sport that you are just focusing on you and not the people around you. And I think a lot of people can leave quite a lot on the table. You can post to social media and say everything. There's certain people that I know that their entire lives they post through their social media, whether it's Facebook comments or even Snapchat, which is one I tend not to use. But we need to respect that that's what some people are doing. and that we can follow their lives, and that it takes actually quite a lot of courage to put out so much content, because at the end of the day, I think people are just trying to share and are just trying to resonate with someone, which is something that I also feel like you can achieve through real life conversations. And that's again where the balance that Mariana mentioned earlier comes in, balancing how much you put out on social media and keeping some of that for yourself, because there's certain parts of your life that aren't necessarily meant for social media. They're meant for the quiet moments between you and a friend, sat over a coffee on a Saturday afternoon, or they're between you and a partner when you go out on a first date, or they're between you and your family when you're going through ups and downs. They're personal. They're moments that you keep forever, memories, and know that everyone who uses social media has those away from the app, no matter how much they're sharing. And remember that people are all quite complex, and that everyone has their own reasons for posting, their own reasons for sharing, no matter how trivial the content is. Even something like memes that are put on Facebook and Instagram, I mean, I can find some of them quite funny, and the sharers are just trying to make people laugh, and they're anonymously doing it. I think that social media is a lot more complex than necessarily is given credit, both for good and bad, and I think that there's good aspects to both work and social aspects, and both bad as well. And it's about exploring what those are as a collective, because social media is still kind of in an infant stage. It's not been around long. I mean, YouTube was 2005. 14 years. It's still a child. We're still growing and learning and understanding it together. And I mean, I look forward to sharing this journey, especially through the podcast here on YouTube. Let me know your feedback on how today's episode has gone, whether you like this format, whether you want guests back, and don't worry, we have got guests lined up for the next few weeks' episodes. Very excited to bring all this new content to you. So happy to be doing this here on YouTube, doing this via social media as well, via Facebook, bringing it to you in whatever format I can get it to you so that people can listen and I can hopefully give you something new. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the My Generation podcast.